Passage number 2 from test 2, numbers 12 to 22. Let's begin. The first time I visited the Art Institute of Chicago, I expected to be impressed by its famous large paintings. On the one hand, I couldn't wait to view painter George Seurat's 10-foot wide A Sunday Afternoon on the island of La Grande Jatte in its full size. It took me by surprise then when my favorite exhibit at the museum was one of its tiniest. Okay, let's stop there. We have got an opening word question. Does on the one hand or on one hand make sense? On one hand, when you use that to set up a contrast that comes later, right? You'd say on one hand or on the one hand, and then later you would say, but on the other hand, or on other hand, I think it would just be on the other hand. In any event, you're setting up a contrast later. We don't see that anywhere. In fact, this is giving us an example of what's being described in the previous sentence, right? I expected to be impressed by its famous large paintings, for example, the 10-foot wide one right here. But we don't see that with on one hand. That is contrast, as we would see with choice C, however. For instance is good because that's like for example, right? This is, for instance, the kind of famous large painting I'm talking about is this one. Similarly is not quite right. We want something more of an example. This is not similar to something in the previous sentence. It's an example of something in the previous sentence. So we would go with B. All right, next one, number 13. On one hand, or for instance, I couldn't wait to view painter George Seurat's 10-foot wide A Sunday Afternoon on the Island. Okay, so we've got a question which is about the possessive is the same for each. So really it's about the usage of the commas. I couldn't wait to view painter George Seurat's 10-foot wide. Remember, if it's in commas, take it out of the sentence and ask yourself, is this a sentence that makes sense? So let's see. I couldn't wait to view painter 10-foot wide A Sunday Afternoon on the Island. Okay, that doesn't make any sense because painter is an adjective describing a person, right? It should be painter George Seurat's 10-foot wide painting. If this is in between commas, though, that means it's not essential, which means we can get rid of it, but we can't, which means this is not non-essential. In fact, this is essential. This, though, however, is a two or none situation. So right away, we can get rid of B and C because they only have one comma. We need either two or none. And we've established that we need none because it's essential. So this one is D. 14. It took me by surprise then when my favorite exhibit at the museum was one of its tiniest, the Thorne miniature rooms. The first thing to look at is this its. Remember, with the apostrophe, this is short for it is. And we ask ourselves, does this make sense? So plug it in. My favorite exhibit at the museum was one of it is tiniest. No, that doesn't make any sense. This should be just its, no apostrophe. So we can get rid of A and get rid of D. And now it's down to semicolon or colon. Remember, with a semicolon, each sentence has got to be complete. And this is just a noun phrase. It's not even a sentence, no verb or anything. So we can't use a semicolon, but we can use a colon, as we do in choice C, to introduce a small phrase, which we do, of course, here. And so we're going to use the colon. So our answer is going to be C. 15. Viewing the exhibit, I was amazed by the intricate details of some of the more ornately decorated rooms. I marveled at a replica of a salon, a formal living room, dating back to the reign of French King Louis XV. Built into the dark paneled walls are bookshelves stocked with leather-bound volumes. The couch and chairs, in keeping with the style of the time, are characterized by elegantly curved arms and legs. They are covered in luxurious velvet. So let's go back to 15. We want to know whether we want to add this sentence. Some scholars argue that the excesses of King Louis XV's reign contributed significantly to the conditions that resulted in the French Revolution. So should we add this? Well, we mentioned French King Louis XV previously. Okay, fine. But do we care about whether or not he contributed to the French Revolution? This passage of this paragraph is talking about this room, which may have, or at least a replica of a room, which goes back to the time of the king, but we don't really care about the king in particular. It's just a time reference. We don't care about the fact that he might have led to the French Revolution or blah, 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 blah. Not really relevant. So this is an example of this being off topic. So get rid of A. We don't care that it provides historical context. It's off topic. This doesn't explain why it's ornately decorated. So we want something like no. No, because it interrupts the paragraph's description of the miniature salon. Yeah, it's just off topic and just not producing good flow from one part of the paragraph to the next. No, because it implies that the interior designer of the salon had political motivations. Doesn't say anything about political motivations. That's weird. Answer here is going to be C. It's totally off topic and it interrupts or blurs the focus of the paragraph. 16. The couch and chairs, in keeping with the style of the time, are characterized by elegantly curved arms and legs. They are covered in luxurious velvet. What we have here is a very classic comma splice. Two complete sentences separated with only a comma. Here's one complete sentence. Here's a second complete sentence. So we can get rid of A. B is going to be the same problem. It swaps out they for the couch and chairs, but it's still two complete sentences. In D, we get rid of the subject and we just have this comma R, and now we have no subject at all, and it's even worse than it was before. It's kind of like it's still, I suppose, a comma splice / run-on. It's just a messed up question because we don't have any subjects at all. Notice in C, however, we've gotten rid of the comma, we've gotten rid of the they, and we've added an end. So what we have here is that fancy phrase I mentioned before, the compound predicate, but we've connected these two sentences with just an end. No comma, no repetition of the subject. We looked at this exactly in some of the lecture videos. So the couch and chairs, in keeping with the style of the time, are characterized by elegantly curved arms and legs, and are covered in luxurious velvet. Perfect. So we'll go with choice C. 17. The exhibit showcases 68 miniature rooms inserted into a wall at eye level. Each furnished room consists of 3 walls. The 4th wall is a glass pane through which museum goers observe. The rooms and their furnishings were painstakingly created to scale at 1/12 their actual size, so that 1 inch in the exhibit correlates with 1 foot in real life. A couch, for example, is 7 inches long, and that is based on a 7-foot long couch. Each room represents a distinctive style of European, American, or Asian interior design from the 13th to the 20th centuries. Okay, which choice gives a second supporting example that is most similar to the example already in the sentence? So we need something similar to this example. A couch is 7 inches long. Notice this original just says what it's based on. It doesn't give us another example. A teacup is about 1/4 of an inch. Notice this is similar to the previous example. The first example gives us the object and how small it is or what it is to scale. And then we get another object at a certain scale as well, certain size. So B is looking good. There are even tiny cushions on some. That is not as specific as the first example. It doesn't match. It's not most similar. That's our key here. Household items are also on the scale. Oh, very nice, I suppose, but that is not an example similar to the first, but B is, so we go with B. The plainer rooms are more sparsely furnished. Their architectural features, furnishings, and decorations are just as true to the periods they represent. So which choice most effectively combines these? So let's see. The plainer rooms are more sparsely furnished by their architectural features, furnishings, and decorations. So that's redundant, right? They're furnished by their furnishings. That's not adding anything. The plainer rooms are more sparsely furnished, but their architectural features, furnishings, and decorations are just as true as to the periods they represent. So this is a nice, clean way of connecting them. We have a comma and a conjunction to connect two complete sentences. We're showing contrast with the word but, right? That these plain rooms are sparsely furnished, but they're still true to their periods. So B is looking pretty good, structurally and logically. How about C? The plainer rooms are more sparsely furnished, their architectural features, furnishings, and decorations are just as true as the periods to the periods they represent. So C is grammatically okay. There's no problem with the grammar of C. It's two complete sentences separated with a colon. The issue is the logic. It doesn't really make sense to not show contrast here like we do in B. When you have a colon, as we described earlier, when you've got a follow-up phrase or sentence, it has to relate directly or build off of or explain further something in the first part of the sentence. And we don't really see that here. Without the but, without the contrast, it's just not clear how these two sentences relate in a way that it is in choice B. How about D? The plainer rooms are more sparsely furnished, whereas architectural features, furnishings, and decorations are just as true to the periods they represent. So whereas is not going to be a good connection here. It does show contrast, but we can't use a comma and whereas to connect two complete sentences in this way typically. So choice B is going to be the better option. So we'll go with B. One of my favorite rooms in the whole exhibit, in fact, is an 1885 summer kitchen. The room is simple but spacious with a small sink and counter along one wall. a cast iron wood stove and some hanging pots and pans against another wall, and a small table under a window of the third wall. So which choice most closely matches the stylistic pattern established earlier in the sentence? We mentioned this is a question type. We never really looked at any examples because they're pretty rare in the lecture videos. However, this is basically parallelism. You look to see how the other parts of the sentence were constructed, and you find a choice that matches that. Notice our structure is we've got an object and then a location on a wall. And then we have another object and another location against a wall. And then in the example we have originally, we have an object and we've got a location in reference to a wall. So when we look at the stylistic pattern we already have, it's pretty much already matching. So we like A. A small table is under the third wall's window. We want to have, I guess B isn't the worst, but it's not matching this pattern, right? Along one wall, against another wall, under a window of the third wall. This is more parallel than we get here where we have this possessive. We don't see the possessive in either the other formats. So for that reason, we're going to want to get rid of choice B. Another reason actually is this contains a verb, whereas the others don't contain a verb, right? There is no verb, subject-verb relationship in any of those other examples. They're all just, again, an object, a location, an object, a location. Here we've got an object, a verb, and then a location with the possessive, so it doesn't match up quite right. C and D both begin with the wall. We want to begin with the object, right? Sure, the object comes later, but the object should come first to match these. So best choice here is A. As I walked through the exhibit, I overheard a visitor's remark. You know that grandfather clock actually runs, its glass door swings open, and the clock can be wound up. So here we're looking at really this first part is this possessive. Notice it's one visitor. So we need to instead add apostrophe S, not est apostrophe. This is saying there's more than one visitor saying this. And that, of course, doesn't make any sense. So if anything, we want a visitor's remark. Notice that's not any of the choices. We certainly can get rid of B. We can get rid of A. So how about I overheard a visitor remarked? No, because I overheard a visitor remark is totally fine. We don't need to indicate the past tense because we've already indicated it. We're indicating that I overheard this thing happen at that particular time. So we're okay with remark. We can actually go with then choice D. It doesn't have the apostrophe S, though it could, because here we're basically just making it a subject and a verb. I overheard a visitor remark something, right? You can imagine this could say, I overheard a visitor say blah, 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 blah. You wouldn't say, I overheard a visitor said. That's weird. It's not consistent. So you would go with something like choice D, where it's just visitor remark. And it could have been, I overheard a visitor's remark, apostrophe S. It's just not a choice they gave us, but D is fine here anyway. Let's try 21. Dotted with pin-sized knobs, another visitor noticed my fascination with a tiny writing desk and its drawers. Notice we have this opening participial phrase with an ed to start it. What is it describing? Well, literally, it's describing the visitor. So is it the visitor that's dotted with pin-sized knobs? No, it's probably the writing desk and its drawers that's dotted with pin-sized knobs. So we're going to want to rearrange this to make that clear. Another visitor dotted with pin-sized knobs. Again, this is still saying the visitor is dotted with pin-sized knobs, as is choice C, another visitor dotted with pin-sized knobs. But notice D, another visitor noticed my fascination with a tiny writing desk and its drawers dotted with pin-sized knobs. Now here is a situation where the SAT is being actually, unfortunately, inconsistent with how they do things. There really should not be a comma here, because if there is a comma, we looked at this before. We said it's very unlikely to have an ed participial phrase at the end of the sentence. And if you do, you're not going to have a comma there. So I think this is the SAT being inconsistent. In any event, the only one that possibly works, that's even close, is choice D. So yeah, chalk this one up to, I think, an SAT error. But in any event, it's the best one, so we go with the best one we can, which is choice D. So To make the passage most logical, where should we put paragraph 2? So we're moving a whole paragraph in this question. So paragraph 2 is, if you recall, when the author is viewing the exhibit, viewing the rooms, viewing the style, viewing how they're set up. Notice it was a bit weird. I didn't mention this when we were reading, but number 3 talks about the general specifications of the exhibit, all the rooms, how they're put together. But it comes after the narrator already viewing those rooms. So it would actually make sense to have this discussion come after the discussion of the exhibit and what kind of rooms there are there. And it makes sense to put it then before 4 because 3 talks about, or 2 talks about very ornate rooms, and then 4 goes on to talk about more sparsely furnished rooms. So it makes sense to put 2 after 3, which is why we're going to go with B. We don't like where it is now. Putting it after 4 doesn't make any sense because we want to contrast the ornate rooms with the sparse rooms in that order. And putting it at the end of the passage doesn't make sense because we've already established, we want to establish this author's view of this earlier, after or before we go on to this discussion of this specific little vignette. So in any event, D is not going to work. The best place to put it is after 3 because that makes the most logical sense. So this one is choice B.